Hi,
Okay, welcome
everyone.
everyone.
Sorry, it's Lauren
You
here
go
from
on.
Thrive. We've got David here today from MYOB who's going to take us through MYOB Acumatica and give us an overall look at it. Over to you.
Thanks, Lauren. That was a good introduction. Welcome everyone. My name is David. As Lauren introduced you, I am a consultant, um, and I work a lot with Acumatica. As some of you might have heard it. It used to be called MYOB Advanced. Now, in all their wisdom, they decided to rebrand it. So we'll be calling it Acumatica now, and you'll see that I get well and proper confused with calling it two different names. So bear with me. Today, what I'm going to endeavor to do is give you a quick introduction to the system as a whole, without from a very high level, and then we're going to sort of look more into the construction module. Okay. What you can see on screen now, hopefully, is the landing screen when you first log into MyOB.
Yep.
This is where you should go. So I think we a good place to start off with this is it's a totally web-based system, and what that means for you is you no longer have to be tied into an on-premise system, and this is accessible from any mobile device. So if you have a phone, you can access it from a smartphone. If you've got a tablet, if you've got a laptop, if you've got a desktop system. So it's that access issue has been overcome. You've got proper access to it. If some of you might be conversant with MYOB accounting, right? Now, although that comes into the same family, they're two different programs. Okay, with advanced or Acumatica, as we call it now, it's a more in-depth system. It gives you that ability to track more, to keep, to build in more compliance into the system, to be able to get information faster, to be able to bring together information or to lump together information from different modules. So you might have an invoice sitting in your AP section. You can connect that to different modules within the section. You can connect that to a project. If you've got manufacturing, you can connect it to a purchase order, so on, to a production order, so on and so forth. So the system is quite, I'd like to say, a holistic system, if you will, where it covers nearly all workflows within an organization. But what MYOB has endeavored to do is break it up into different sort of modules like construction, manufacturing, distribution. Having said that, you can still get all of that together under the same umbrella. Okay, let's jump into the system. What you see over here is all the different modules. Okay, so the core modules are, of course, your accounts payable, your receivables, your finance, your banking, and if you want, you can have payroll in there. So these are what we call core functionalities within the system. And as in with other system, it does the same functions, but it does it better. So there's a lot more functionality that's been pushed into this. So which means you can tie in these individual documents to a lot of other places within the system, and you've got that sort of bread trail or the breadcrumb for you to follow through and jump from one document. Where's this? Go from the source till the finality of it all, and that's a very handy feature to have within this system. So this is an ERP system, and today we're going to be looking at just a little bit of navigation in there, and then just for you to understand, what the layout of the system is and how we move around between modules. So let's have a look quickly at, let's say, finance, for instance. So the finance functionality contains everything like a chart of accounts, things that drive all those postings, all of those financial reporting functions within the system. Um, as you would appreciate, the system is built on a double entry basis. And what that means is if you've got a debit, it has to be a balancing entry. So if you've got a debit, you've got to have a credit. And now I'm going into my accounting, I'm putting on my accounting hat. So if I put anyone to sleep, I do apologize in advance. Um, Basically, the system is very rigid in terms of you have to have a balancing entry. So you can't put in a one-sided entry that affects only, let's say, your trade debtors, for instance, and doesn't go to an expense, or sorry, doesn't hit any of your income stream. The system does need you to have that double entry in there, and it will not allow you to do anything else. Mm, we have the we have what we call ledgers. So we have an actual ledger where all your transactional actual data will sit into, and it isolates that. If you are running budgets, we create a budget ledger, and you can track that separately to run your comparisons. Um, Another good thing is within the system, you can have, let's say you've got multiple entities, you've got different companies. So I can go into the configuration side and set up different companies. So you might have, let's say you've got 4 different entities that you deal with, but you manage, you track, you have your workflows for all these 4 companies. And instead of having 4 different uh, areas, you can bring them all together. You can have everything under the same banner. We call this a tenant. So this data set is called a tenant. You can have multiple tenants, you can have single tenants. Again, dependent on what your process is, dependent on what your requirements are, we will set up the system accordingly for you. So for argument's sake, you've got 4 different tenants. You've got 4 different entities, and each entity would, you need to set them up separately, but still, you might want to say, I want to have all of the reports and everything for that entity, or rather, you want consolidated reports. The system can do all that. It has all that functionality in there. So that's sort of giving you an idea of uh, of what the system can do from a finance level. Just in the setup or the way it's laid out, you'll see they've got different groupings over here. So you've got a transaction grouping, a profile grouping. So basically, anything that falls under the transaction is where you enter actual transactions in the system. So like a cash receipt, an AP bill, an AR invoice. So all of that will come under transaction sections. So this is the same layout throughout the whole system. So whichever module you go to, I'm in finance now. If I were to choose payables, you'll see they've got the same kind of groupings everywhere. This is just so as to make it easier to navigate within the system. um, and if you want to set up, so all your configuration type of entries, so your profiles would be your supplier cards, if or your supplier details form. So all of that kind of sits in one grouping over here. And the good thing about this is, when you configure um, these the system, you can change things around. So you might say, I want to rename certain pieces of information in here. You can do all that. So the system is very flexible in terms of what you can and can't do. And all of this, most of this is just out of the box. You don't have to do anything, um, get any other things done specifically for this. But it's all, you can just configure this from an out of the box perspective. as with, if you're familiar using a lot of web-based programs, you'll be very familiar with this. You highlight this, there's a little star over there, you can click on this and that will make it your favorites. So clicking on this will now push this into this favorite section. So if you are someone who does um, things on a very regular basis, you can go and choose those functions and push them into this section, so you've got that easy access to it rather than go through and find where it sits, or um, or look for it. uh, Talking about looking for functions within, or looking for certain things within Acumatica, it has a really good global search function in here. So over here, if I was to go and put Bill, it'll bring out all those functions that has that phrase in there. Okay, that says, okay, this is a bill. It also gives you any trans. You can also search for transactions with phrase, with certain details from the phrasing in there. You can go and have a look at the help topics from here. And this is a little bit slow. I do apologize for that. My internet connection is slightly slow, but you can get to the help section from here. Um, so that's basically navigation in a nutshell. You do have a lot of options in here. We're going to concentrate on the construction module today, as I mentioned earlier. But the good thing with Acumatica is, with your construction module, you don't only get your construction module. You also get access to inventory, if that's something that you use. If you use other bits and pieces within the system, you can activate it. But let's say you use construction, but for some reason you say, no, I don't want to use inventory, I'm service based. You have the ability to turn that feature off. Okay, so it's not locked in stone where this is what you get and you have to live with that. There's a lot of flexibility, and all of that comes up to that configuration piece. You can configure the system 10 ways to Sunday. It's just that configurable. You don't need to do anything other than that. You don't need to go in and get a coder or a developer to go in there and work on it. It's quite user friendly. So coming into the construction module, so construction it basically runs all your projects. So with your projects, there is some configuration that goes in over there, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. But it has very good functionality around managing your projects, updating your projects before on the fly, your subcontracting. So if you have all of these functionalities that you're currently dealing with, then you should definitely look into this system, because it's quite strong from that perspective. So let's jump into the project profiles. So over here on the system, you can see I'm choosing the projects function, and it brings up a list of projects. Now, for a user, you have the ability to go in there and group all the projects you have on the system from the perspective of however you want to see it. If you want to see projects that are active on top, we've split projects basically on their status. So I've got any projects that are active, any projects in planning, any other status that it's in, so canceled or suspended, any completed project. You can also put in a tab in there that says any project relevant to the user. Okay, so we can have a tab in there that says this user, they go and land in this section that shows projects only relevant to them. There's also new features over here where you don't have to drill into. If you see these hyperlinks over here, when you click onto this takes you into the project profile. What MYOB has now done is given you the ability to they've given you a side panel over here. And using this, there's a lot of functionality that we can bring in. So I can just click on this project and have a and have a quick view of what the project is. So without drilling in there, I can actually get a quick view over here. And it basically shows me the same thing as what it is when I drill into the project. I've got access to everything over here, but in a bit of a restricted view. I can easily skip and change projects, and the system is clever enough to do that for me. So where this comes in handy is you've got a project manager who quickly wants to check a particular piece of information. So instead of them going in there and clicking and moving to that screen, and if they want to check multiple projects, they can do it from this screen. So they can click on any of these and have that ability for the system to just automatically take it through. And they can go, okay, I want to have a look at the summary and see who's the project manager on each of these. So I can click there. I want to see who the project manager is on that. It's the same person. Click there. That changes on top there to 79. Oh, it's the same person. So that's where this comes in. While as if they click in, they've got to either come out or they've got to go on top and search for the project. So these are some handy features they've got in here. And this is very customizable. Okay, you don't need to do anything more, or if you want to have more information, you can put things on there, you can add, you can take away things based on what your particular circumstances are. You can see service orders connected to this. So again, there's a lot of information in there without me going into too much of detail. So let's jump into the project. I'll close off the side panel screen and we'll go into a project. So within Acumatica, every project needs to have a unique project ID. Okay, and the project IDs we can configure it. So if you've got multiple entities, each doing their own projects, we can actually I have to check that, but we can configure it. No, I think I might be jumping the gun over there. But each project, just going back to this, each project needs to have a unique identity, a unique ID. The system will generate those project IDs for you if you configure it as such. But if you want to configure or if you want to create your own project IDs, you can. It's completely up to you. But the thing is, every project has to have a unique ID because everything, all transactions, all billing, everything is tied into this project ID. Okay, and this is the ID we use for our purchase orders for a few days, an invoice. If we've got a subcontractor, we use this ID to tag all those transactions to a particular project. Okay, so what you see over here is the sort of landing page, if you will, for when you jump into a project profile. In the summary tab, you'd see, again, groupings of information. Under the project properties, you'll see it gives you the ability to tag or to configure how you want this project to behave. Yeah? Do you want the revenue budget? Do you want it at a task level? So you've got all these configuration options in here. You can tag your project manager to here, to this. And so what happens is every time you can send emails or you can send reminders to this particular project manager. Project manager becomes the sort of the owner of the project within the system. So we can run reporting. We can do a lot of different functions based on this project manager field. If you've got multi-currencies for a project, you can do that over here. You can tag a project to different currencies. And there's other sort of configurations within here that will tell you how you want this project, or you can define to make this project behave in a way that you want to. Each project will have probably might have its own billing rules within, and I'll touch on this a bit more later on. So within this summary tab, you can define what sort of um, billing mod, what type of billing you want to push out to the customer. Is it just a progress type billing, or is it a time and material, or is it a combination of progress and time and material? So we can set up all these, we can configure all these bits and pieces in the background. And it gives, what that means for you is that it gives you a lot of flexibility for you to configure the project however you want to. And it takes away that uh, it takes away the hard part of you having to go and manually bill it. The system will, once you set up these rules in the back end, the system will run the project billing for you based on what these rules are. Retentions. With the retentions, you can set up retentions at a project level, at the project level as a whole, or you can set it up at different levels. Again, there's lots of ways you can do this. You've got different retention modes in here. Um, it also has the ability to set up stepped retentions. I don't have that set up in this particular example, but if your organization uses that kind of a model, then yes, the system can handle that. It's just a simple click and it'll come up in there. Okay. Uh, the other thing is you've got complete control over how you want this project to be visible within the other functions in the ERP system. So you can say, I want this when someone's entering a purchase order, for instance, I want them to have access to this project. Um, or if you want to restrict visibility in certain cases, you can. A good example of restricting visibility is if you create a project just to capture overheads. Okay, and that's more for an internal management or internal tracking purpose. In that case, you really wouldn't want to have this project available so that your AR person or your AP person can have access to that, or someone who's raising purchase orders can have access to that. So in that case, you can untick these little options over here that says which functions have the ability to view these projects or have access to this particular project. So that gives you a lot more control. Okay. So that's your summary tab. Going on to your tasks. The system loves you to create all these different tasks based on your project. So, for instance, in this one, it's we've got just 3 major tasks, and what we are saying is these tasks, um, each of them have their own budgets in there. We're going to build these tasks in a certain manner. All of this is easily configurable in the system. And you can drill down further into these tasks and see how this can just what this means is it gives you a lot of control over how you set up all of these individual line items within the project. Most of these things that you see over here is feeding through from the summary tab. Okay, and you don't have to individually set these up. You can if you want to, if there's a requirement to do that, but overall you wouldn't really set this up. The good thing that I like using, that I like with this particular function, with these tabs, that if you're setting things up in Excel, if you're using Excel a lot to set up your projects, your initial project setups, you can bring that information into Advanced quite easily. There's a fixed template. You can just push your information into that, and with a single click of the button of this option, you can bring in any number of lines of data into this. So let's say you've got a particular project with more than 300 lines. Okay, so I've seen this in some of the construction industry where you've got a level 1, level 2, level 3, and then even that's broken down into further tasks. So if you've got multiple lines like that, and it's going to be really hard in certain instances for you to manually type that in, you can actually bring that in via Excel, because that might be an easier medium for you to initially enter the information into, or it might be something that you're already doing. Based on that, it's an easy way to bring this in, and we've got umpteen number of clients who use this functionality to actually bring this in. So over here, what we're looking at is your revenue. So again, everything is ID driven. So everything has to have a unique ID within advanced. But with this particular function, you can create your own unique IDs. Okay. What you see over here is we create billing rules against each individual line. You can have all the lines don't have to have the same billing rule. You can have different billing rules for different lines. It's very dependent on what your process is. We can activate or deactivate any lines individually. It shows you the completion percentage based on what comes out of your revenue budget. And this also just shows you, this is more just showing you information of how these lines have been configured. So let's say someone sets up a project and there's somebody else, there's a different employee who's a project manager. The project manager can now come in here and review all of this information and say, okay, has this project been set up correctly? Do we need to change anything? So then at that point in time, if they do need to update it, they can update it. And again, with that, Advance has the ability to give access rights to different areas within the system. So if you've got a project manager and you want him to only look at certain bits of it, have view only access to certain pieces of information within certain areas, that's possible. We can restrict it, or we can grant access. So all of that configuration, so the system is very configurable, and it's easily sort of molded to what you want, basically. So the next thing is, one thing I did miss over here is when we set up a task, you can set up a task based on whether you want it to be a cost only type of task, or a cost and revenue type of task, or a revenue only task. So you might have, let's say, admin, for instance. So you want to track admin costs within your project. So that wouldn't be something that you'd actually term as a revenue item. So that's more of your costing. That's more to track your cost. So we can make that as a cost only task in here. If you've got, in this case, we've got finishing. So with finishing, we're going to have costs related to that particular workflow or that process. And that's also going to be, and we're also going to build the client for that. So in that case, instead of creating two individual sort of tasks in there, we can create the one task and term it as both cost and revenue. Okay. The next thing is the revenue budget. So within your projects, you can specify both your revenue and your cost budgets. This gives you the ability to track where you are. You can run forecasts. You can have a look at any point in time and see where your revenue is, where your percentage is. The system also we can configure the system to say when you are more from a cost perspective, if something's going over budget, to give you warnings, to say, you know what, you're going over budget in this particular task against this particular cost code. You might need to review that. So that's a sort of a pause for whoever's entering that information in there. System's quite good like that. It has lots of built-in risk management, if you will, to manage those sort of things. So with your revenue items, you can create any number of revenue items within the system. Again, similar to your tasks, you can just bring them in via the Excel functionality over here. Okay, you can track each revenue item based on whether it has to be, whatever the unit of measure is. You can have multiple units of measure set up in the system, and you can track each revenue item based on that. Now, what we see over here is your original budget amount. So you can go in here and say, this is what I'm budgeting for my project. And you can have all of that laid out nice and easily. Then you've got a lot of information within here that shows you if you've got some sort of commitment in the system, what those committed amounts are. If you've got a variance that comes, so mostly within your revenue budget, you'll see variances, and that will show as committed or potential commitment. So once you confirm that the system preserves your original budget amount, and it'll show you if there's any variances added to your project. It'll show you the revised budget amount. So that way a project manager can see, okay, this was what our original amount was. This is the variance that's come through, and that's the revised budget amount. That way profitability can be tracked a little bit better, rather than going, oh, what's the original amount? How much of variances did we put in? So if you're going to manually do it, there's lots of backtracking and lots of moving parts. Whereas with this, it brings it all nicely together. You can see everything in the one area. They've got access to all of that information in the same area. So over here, it not only tracks your budgeted amount, it also shows your actual amount. So it shows your actual quantities, actual amount billed, and against what, the performance, the percentage. It shows you against your actual budget, what your performance levels are, which is basically just your completed percentages. And it also shows if there's any outstanding amount or what the variance is. So variance is just basically the difference between your actuals and your budgets. Okay. Cost budgets are set up in the exact same way, with the exception that these are costs. I'm stating the obvious over here, but the same things over here. So if you've got costs related to your project, all of that will be captured over here under this particular tab. So the way this is done is, as you can see, we've got the task. You can further classify this task and say, okay, within this task, I've got further classifications that could be general requirements. In this place, it's a preliminary council work, and we want to be able to capture that in different areas of our P&Ls. Okay, so we say, okay, with this particular preliminary work, we've got two types of costs related to this. One is a subcontractor, where some subcontractors would go out and get us, some certifications or whatever. And then we've got our own internal employees costs that we want to capture. So in that case, you've got the ability, the system gives you a lot of flexibility around, being able to track at a very nitty-gritty level, at a very low level. And then it also gives you the ability to roll it up and look at those costs at a very high level. So you do have that ability to do that. If there is a requirement for you to further break down each task into further tracking requirements, we do that via what we call the cost code engine. Again, over here, you'll see the original budgeted amount. If there's any variances to that, all of that will be shown up over here, and we can track all of that information in the one area quite easily. If you're more comfortable dumping this information into Excel and slicing and dicing it for you to get whatever information you need, it's just an easy click to push this into Excel. The system just very quickly do that, and then you can do your analysis from there. Okay, from here, now that we've looked at our revenue and cost budgets, the system gives you the ability to look at your costs and your revenue in a sort of a P&L setting. So this is basically your P&L for this particular project. So you can run this. A project manager, if they want to check their profitability on a project, this is where they'd come to. This would be their first stop. Now they'd come to the balances tab. They'll have a look here. They've got all the information over here for them to be able to make those, to do their analysis, to make any, for whatever decisions they need to make. All of that information, the financial information, sits in this tab. Again, this is very configurable with the ability. So we've got this ability to add and remove fields from a screen. So I can go over here and say, you know what, this is something that I'm not going to have in there, committed change order amount or revised committed amount. So I can go and remove these fields at any point in time, or I can add them back in there. It's very configurable, and it's based completely on what your requirements are. So from here, let's move into commitments. So commitments are nothing but your purchase orders or your subcontracts. So with these purchase orders and subcontracts, so you might say, I want to create a purchase order from the project. The system gives you the ability to do that. So someone might have created an RFI and said, we need this particular part. Can we get that? So the project manager can, if that's something that the project manager does for you, he or she can come to this area and create a purchase order from here. The system has a great feature to be able to create a purchase order on the fly from within that project module. They don't have to jump back into the purchases module and go to that particular screen. The system gives you the ability to do it from here. Similar things with the contract, with the subcontract. So let's say you've got a subby that you need to complete a particular piece of work for this contract. You can create that subcontract on the fly. It's quite easy. It's not overly complicated. They've kept that functionality as simple as possible, and all of that can get tracked from within the project module. Let's have a quick look at these purchase orders. So from here, we can see that there's a purchase order that's already been created, and it gives you the information about the purchase order. So that's a supplier, that's what the supplier name is, but most importantly, it shows you the status. So you can filter on these statuses and say, I want to see only those that are open, or I want to see all those that have been completed. So I can go here, click on that and say completed, and say okay. Because there's nothing in the system that's been completed, it'll clear all the options over here. You can go here and say select all again, and it'll bring up all that information. So from a project manager's perspective, they can come here and have a look at this and go, I've got an open purchase order. Let me have a look at what that is. And it's going back quite a while. And they can go in there and review that purchase order and see what's happening. Does someone need to chase this up? Is there some sort of action required? against this. All of those functions can be done from here. From here, they can actually send out an email and say, whoever's in charge, they can go on top into the activities and create an email. They can add an email and go to the purchase department, for instance, and say, can you please follow this up? We're waiting on this particular project for this particular piece or these goods. What's happening with this? Can you give me an update? Because I've got to give the guys on site an update. So all of this can be done from here. So the functionality is quite vast. Again, it is there. If there's a requirement to use it, it's there. If there's no requirement, it doesn't make any difference to you. It just sits in the back end. It won't cause any issues. So that's a purchase order. Let's have a look at the subcontract, for instance. So this is an existing subcontract against this particular project. And I can see for this particular subcontract, I'm trying to open this. Okay, I've subcontracted 10 hours here. Now, the project manager might have gotten a bill, and that bill will come to them and say, okay, the project manager might need to create the AP bill. I don't know if that's done, but they can go into this subcontract and have that ability to enter that AP bill from here. Okay, and you can say it's only a couple of hours that's been billed against the subcontract, and all of that can be tracked against this. From this screen, you've got the ability to look at what's been billed so far. So when I come to this tab, I can see that there's already a bill been created, and that's for 2 hours. So you can keep track of your subcontracts within the project module in itself. It just ties everything in nicely together. All the information sits in one place, and as a project manager or as a manager, you don't need to jump from screen to screen to be able to drill down and get all that information. Everything sits in the one area, and you can go in there and find things, track things, or even create new items on the fly. So invoices. Based on how you set up your billing rules, so it could be a progress billing, it could be a time and material billing, it could be a combination of both. It's very dependent on how you want to set up your rules. You just click the run project billing. What the system will do is it'll come into the summary tab, it'll go down to this billing area and see what was the last billing date. And generally, the next billing date would be there, and I'll check and see, is it within that next billing date? Is it, is it past that date? So the system will check all of those details and then produce a bill. It will then go into your revenue budget, and over here, you can define what percentage has been completed. Okay, you can go here and say I'm now completed 5% of this particular task. I've completed 25% of this task, and I've completed 30% of this task. So when you put in those completed percentages, and you run the project billing, the system will go in there, pick up those percentages, and then bill accordingly. Okay, and it's also clever enough. The next month round, you go and say, I've now completed 10% of the project. What the system will do is it will have a look when you run your project billing again. It'll come back to this field and say, okay, they've now put 10% in here. What's been billed so far? And it'll reduce that amount that's been billed so far and only bill for the remaining amount of what's been entered in there. So it's quite savvy that way, and you don't need to sit and manually calculate or do those things. You just let the system do it for you. So if you have the necessity to create a pro forma invoice and send that off to your customer to get authorized before you can create an invoice, the system can do that for you. Okay, you can either create a pro forma or you can just create an invoice. In this case, there's a pro forma that's been created, and it doesn't want to play nice. But basically, there'll be a pro forma that's created. You can either print that, email it from there. You have the ability to do that. That's quite stock standard now with all systems. And once you get that back, you can convert that pro forma into an invoice and then send that out to your customer for that to be paid. It's only at that point in time that the system will then recognize that within your financials and say, okay, you've got a pro forma invoice that's now been converted to an invoice. Only then it'll push it into your subledger, which is your trade debtors, and it'll go in and sit in your on your balance sheet as an asset, as a receivable. Okay, so that's with your invoices. Talking about variances now, this is in the construction industry. This is the most common thing. So there are two tabs over here that deal with variances. So with variances, you can either create a change request, get that to be authorized, and once that's authorized, you can convert that into a change order. Or if you don't have, if there's no necessity for a change request to be created, you can directly create a change order. I don't have one set up for this particular project, unfortunately, but I can show you. I'll touch on that a little later. With the change orders and change requests, there's different types that the system can manage in there. So it can be an internal or an external. So a change order for your customer or just an internal change order. And I'll get into that a little bit more in detail just after we've finished with this screen. So the next thing, I won't go into union locals because that's an American requirement, but activities. So this is a real nice area that most project managers really like to come to, because what this shows is it shows every single activity that happens within the project. And by activity, what I mean is if you're tracking labor costs, for instance. So over here, you can see your time activities, all of that will come up, and as a project manager, you can then drill down into that if you need to. But it gives you all the information right there on the screen. It says what's the date, how much of time was spent on that, so on and so forth. I'm just trying to drill down into a different type of activity. But up the top over here, if an email was created, for instance, so someone's raised an RFI and said, can you send me some information about this particular job on the project? It doesn't seem right. I don't have enough information around this. Can you send that information off to me, or can you clarify something? So all of that correspondence will come and sit within this area. Okay. And as a project manager, I don't need to jump between screens. I can just come here and have a look at all of that. It's quite visible, quite transparent. They can see who's sending what, and if they need to follow up on anything, it's all right there for them to do that. They can also create different types of activities over here. So if they've had they want to put a note on this project to say, there's something needs to be looked at or you need to be aware of, they can create a note. They need to create an escalation. So there's an issue that needs to be escalated. They can do all of that over here. They can create an email from here that would then tie into this project. They can, if they want to create a task and a reminder, they can do that over here as well. So there's a lot of functionality in this screen that's very useful for anyone who's overseeing the project or who has the status of project owner. This area is a good area to come and see what's been happening, what sort of activity has been happening on the project. All of that information lies in here. You can assign employees to the project, and what that means is only these employees will have access to this project. or you can remove these employees and basically everyone has access. Um, you, if you've got equipment and you need to assign equipment and track costs against that equipment for a project, you can do that over here. The system has the ability to do that. There is some configuration that needs to be done to set up those individual items or those individual equipment items, which is quite obvious, but just something to bear in mind. You can do all of that in here. You can, there's different setups, or there's different pieces of information you can include. So that's pretty much it from a project perspective. Over here, the three dots up the top is an extension menu up the top. And you can run different things from here. You can get reporting from here. You can check different bits and pieces of information. So it gives you a lot of functionality within this screen, and which means you don't have to be jumping from one area to the next to get all this information. Everything is in here. You can suspend projects and then you can reanimate it again. You can start it again once a project is completed. You can do that from here. If a project is not going to go forward, you can cancel it out from here. So there's a lot of things you can do with your budgets. You can lock your budgets if you need to. So let's say you put in a budget and you say, with our process, once the budget is in place, that's it. That's locked in for the life of the project. We do not change it come hello, high, or high water, whatever you want to say for that. So you can go in there and lock your budget. If you do forecasts, so budget forecasts, you can do that from here as well. And you can also, review those forecasts from here. There's there's a lot of functionality. You just have to know what you want, and the system can be configured for it.
That was amazing.
So
Thanks, David. Is there anything else you wanted to show us? Well,
yes, just I know I'm running a little quick, a little behind,
it's okay.
but when you buy the project module, you also get project management, which gives you the ability to do sort of field reports, log photos, drawing logs, create project issues, request for information, and all of that information can be tied into a project. It can be converted into a change order if required and pushed onto the project. So from a, it's not as intense or as wide as some of the other project module operations, but in most cases we see that clients, they find this is enough for their business to manage most of business. You also get a compliance module which keeps track of any sort of compliance related document, especially fire and safety, safety type documents, insurance type documents. And what this does is it alerts you to anything once a compliance on a particular document is expired. It gives you alerts, which means you can go in there and follow that up. So that's construction in a very compressed nutshell, guys. The module is vast, and there's a lot more to show you. But I hope this has sort of given you an idea of what the system can and can't do.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David.
No
Appreciate your
problem.
time. If anyone has any questions, feel free to send me an email and we can talk more. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.